All right, 25 minutes before 10 o'clock. Thank you for tuning in. Probably a lot of you know that Miami Dolphins Don Nottingham is a friend of the station. It's always exciting to be around him. It's just exciting.
Great.
It's just you're with a real star and a real gentleman. Oh my gosh, just such a great guy. And you know what? I have my opinion of all NFL stars based on him because I don't know any other ones. Mm-hmm. He's my one go-to. He's the only name I can drop. I'm going to read to you now from the prepared material that was sent to me so that I don't mess up, okay? A lot of times I wing it. This time I'm going to read it. In 2016, after 20 years in St. Louis, the Rams are back in their longtime home. Some call their return to Los Angeles a relocation, but it's more the restoration of a city landmark. Hollywood's Team, that's the name of the book, by the way, Hollywood's Team, follows the Rams of the 1950s. They were glamorous, glitzy, and most of all, they were exciting. Like the city itself, the Rams were comprised of both big stars and everyday workhorses like John Hock, who is the father of the author. And let me introduce you to Jim Hock. Jim's got his own set of credentials, by the way. He is was a spokesman for the United States Senate. He worked with the Rams as an intern. He served as chief of staff to the United States Secretary of Commerce. And he's written this amazing book, touching story, especially when you consider the fact that it's written by Jim himself. I am putting the cover of the book on the streaming video that we're doing, and it'll be up as a podcast later on. Jim Hock, good morning. Thank you for being on our show.
Hey, Larry, great to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Where are you?
I'm in Washington, D.C. We live in the D.C. area now, originally from Southern California. But, yeah, it's a pleasure to be on and talk about the book.
I can't wait to hear about this. When did your father pass?
He died in 2000 of lung cancer, and just like anyone, who has to deal with the death of a parent, I was trying to deal with that grief. And at his memorial service in L.A. at the time, a number of his old teammates had come and were telling war stories, and we're Irish, so of course the memorial service became a kind of more celebration of my dad's life. But my brother turned to me at one point and said, "Hey, these are great stories. You should write them up," because I was a writer. And that started a process, kind of between 2000 and 2002. And I, in between, had a lot of different jobs and started a company. So I was very busy, had 2 young kids. And so it took me about 10 years to finish because it really was a hobby. And finished the book in about 2013. And then I had a friend in the book business who said, "You have a book called Hollywood's Team. The Rams are moving back to Los Angeles. You need to get this published." So we found a great publisher, and the rest is history. So I get
oh my gosh, the timing was perfect then. I had I didn't know that part of the story. Wow.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. So tell me a little bit about your dad. Tell me when did he start playing for the team?
Yeah, so he was. My dad was kind of. Originally from Pittsburgh, but then when he was a little kid, 9 years old, they moved to L.A., just like a lot of families did, kind of pre-World War II. And he was originally drafted by the Chicago Cardinals, believe it or not. And then he was served in Korea for a little over a year, was drafted into the war, which a lot of NFL veterans were at the time, and then was traded back to his hometown, L.A. Rams. So he had grown up right around the Coliseum, so it was kind of his hometown team. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So the book kind of uses, and my dad's kind of the protagonist of the book, telling his story and my parents' story of how they met, etc., but also weaving in, a lot of the big personalities and the stories about people like Norm Van Brocklin and Bob Waterfield and Elroy Crazy Legs Hirsch, Hall of Famer after Hall of Famer. And even people like their public relations guy who became their general manager, Pete Rozelle, who eventually became the commissioner just a few short years later in 1960. At the age of 33. So lots of big personalities, but the premise of the book is really, talking about the team, using it as a vehicle to talk about, a series of vignettes. The Dodgers had moved back there, back to Los Angeles from Brooklyn. The Rams were the first team to move west of the Mississippi River, but we also touch on integration. The Rams were the first team to integrate a year before Jackie Robinson. So I just grown up, heard these stories. I thought they were really interesting, so I thought I'd put it together in a book.
And that was part of what I wanted to know. Did you have these stories in your mind already anyway from your dad telling them?
I had some of them in my mind, Larry, but honestly, talking to a lot of his old teammates, and then also folks throughout the league, people that played for the Giants like Frank Gifford and Andy Robustelli, or the Colts like Art Donovan, just put more dimension on the stories, and then added additional stories as well. So it's a story of personalities. It's a book about the time. Los Angeles is almost a character, if you will, because that pre and post World War II, the city was exploding. For example, in the 50s, the population of LA basically doubled. You can imagine kind of the growth going on there. So I just thought there were a lot of interesting stories to share, and honestly, originally never meant it for anyone beyond my immediate family and my kids. And
is that right? Wow.
Folks showed interest in it, and for me, it's been a labor of love, and the proceeds for my family that are raised from this book go to a great charity in Los Angeles that help at-risk youth. So.
Nice.
Wow, good for you.
It seems like the characters that are on the team, even though they might have had their differences, they didn't allow ego to overshadow the team as one particular unit when they were playing.
Yeah, it was a great question because it's a different time, right? I mean, you step back, to think about professional football today and the millions of dollars that these young guys are making, and, kind of the glamour and the national television contracts, all that kind of thing. That was not the case in the 50s. So, just to give you a quick story, my father, who was a professional football player, made the Pro Bowl his second to last year before he blew out his knees, and his knees were almost like a character in the book because he's constantly fighting with his knees to keep him going. But my mother was an elementary school teacher, and they basically made the same amount of money. So.
Wow.
These were guys that had jobs in the off season. They had to kind of make ends meet.
I had no idea.
In a way
wow.
that was,
wow. Really?
Yeah, it was kind of pre-national television contracts, so pre-big money starting in the late 50s and 60s and 70s. So, whereas the Rams had their local television contract, they were the first to have that. The big dollars had not yet kind of flown into or got into the game yet.
I wanted to comment on one thing about the book itself. There are ribbons, like bookmarkers, that are in the color of the team colors, and it reminds me of like when you're in church. What is that? A hymnal, right? That has
these Exactly. Yeah, it was a nice touch by the publisher. They put these two blue and yellow in the Rams colors bookmarks, just so you could kind of keep your page. So it's a nice touch. I've never seen that in a book before.
Did you or any
besides the Bible?
Right.
Did you or any of your brothers aspire to be football players?
Yeah, we all did. All three of us did. My oldest brother played in high school. My brother closest to me, and the one who punched me in the arm to inspire the book, both played in college. But in no way we were much less players than our dad.
Was it emotional for you hearing these stories? And was there anything that was told to you that if your dad could hear the stories from heaven, let's say, would he be cringing like, "Oh my God, don't tell my son that story"? were there any of those? Yeah.
I tried to keep it pretty straightforward. There was someone asked me the other day, was it hard to kind of decide which stories there were in the book? And I said yes, because it's your parent and you're obviously biased. But I tried to make it so that folks outside of my family would be interested in just, in the humanity of anyone, right? That's just a young guy who's trying to make it in a sport, just like anyone's trying to make it in a business or what have you. But also the one of the sub-themes of the book is my dad was a really simple, quiet guy, an offensive lineman. Offensive linemen are typically the lunch pail guys on a football team. But you can transpose that to any business where there's just people that are doing the really hard work behind the scenes to make things go, whether that's Hollywood, whether it's a radio station where you work, or a business or government. So that's kind of a theme in the book too, is the just kind of workhorse that my father was. But I think he would be okay with the stories. I didn't try to embarrass anyone.
Did everybody have nicknames on the team, or just a select few?
There was a great question. There were a lot of nicknames. Crazy Legs Hirsch, Van Brocklin, Norman Van Brocklin, their quarterback, was the Dutchman. My dad had a few nicknames: Lantern Jaw, the Hooker. One of his closest friends on the team called him Cotton because he kind of foamed at the mouth, and I guess he sweat. So that was Tank Younger was his name. So he had a nickname as well. So they were nicknamed throughout. It was the times too. It was how to remember people.
I have a question about your mom. There's a photograph in the book. It's a 2-page spread, and it clearly has all the earmarks of a photo from maybe the 60s. I'm not really sure when this picture was, but on the TV, which looks like from that era, and on next to one of the framed black and white photos of your family, it looks like a confirmation candle to me. And that to me says that you were raised in a family that probably had a lot of values, and that usually, and not to take away from us dads, but that usually traces itself to the mom in the family. What role did your mom play in your dad's life, especially as his career?
Yeah, that is a wonderful question, because my parents were a true partnership, and definitely people of faith. Grew up in the Catholic tradition, which is another sub theme of the book. Is that it was their parish in LA was kind of a place where they didn't know each other growing up, but they were in the same area. So those values kind of early on, were set. My mom was the type of person, she was dynamic and still is alive to this day. But, she walks up to at a St. Patrick's Day dance and asks a professional football player to dance. That was kind of unheard of at the time. So she was also.
Is that how they met?
Yeah, that's how they met.
Oh my gosh.
The families knew each other, but my mom didn't know him. So she walked right up to him and said, "Hey, do you want to dance?" And that was kind of their first.
That is a sweet story. Oh my gosh.
So she took the initiative.
Wow. Has your mom read the book?
She has. She was interviewed for the book, and I had a wonderful co-writer who was able to get stories that a son is not able to get out of his mom as well. So it was a great experience, and she's a huge Rams fan to this day, and is looking forward to going back to the Coliseum this fall to see a Rams game.
Oh, you also talk about the some of the dark side, like alcoholism.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So the Rams owner at the time, Dan Reeves, was an amazingly innovative guy. He's the person who saw the country moving west. So he moved the team from Cleveland to Los Angeles, but was really troubled with alcohol, and he definitely had some demons. So they had an ownership group that was constantly fighting with one another. They fired a bunch of coaches. My dad kind of had one of the more stable set of coaches in the 1950s. Sid Gilman eventually became an NFL Hall of Famer himself and an architect of the modern passing game. But yeah, their ownership was troubled, and it's frankly why Pete Rozelle learned a lot of his diplomatic skills in the 50s, because he was having to help the owners kind of make big decisions and had to reach consensus. And took those skills, as I said earlier, to kind of the nationwide, being the commissioner at age 33, which is, they used to call him the boy commissioner.
Wow. Yeah, really. We were watching this old movie. It was a Doris Day movie,
yes.
And they had 3 Yankees in it that were famous at the time: Mickey Mantle, Roger Maris, and
Yogi Berra.
Yogi Berra.
That Touch of Mink.
And so, because New York Yankees, did you have the same thing where celebrities were either featured on the field, or maybe players were featured in movies? Did the relationship between the Hollywood filmmaking community and the team, did they marry themselves to each other in those years?
Absolutely. It's kind of the reason we call the book Hollywood's Team, because Hollywood was infused in the Rams at the time. One of the minority partners of the Rams was Bob Hope, the famous comedian.
Oh, wow.
One of the players was married to Diane Disney, one of my dad's teammates, who's obviously Walt Disney's daughter. So the Disneys were very omnipresent with the Rams in the 1950s. But people crazy like Hirsch, they're all-pro and Hall of Fame wide receiver, was featured in movies. He was an actor. There was actors and comedians all the time at the game. So it definitely was part of the fabric of the culture of the Rams in the 50s. And you saw that in the 60s, 70s, and 80s with players like Fred Dreyer and Merlin Olsen having their own television programs or movie careers themselves.
Yeah.
The game of football itself, it seemed like the Rams were innovated in different areas, whereas right now, if somebody tries something new, you've got all these rules and regulations. They're all over them, and they got to test it out first before they can allow it.
Yeah, exactly. One example of that is they were the first team to experiment with a TV contract. So they had the first local television contract. That was Pete Rozelle helping negotiate that. Obviously took those lessons nationally as well. They're the first team with a logo on their helmets. One of their players, my dad's former teammate Fred Kirky, was paid $1 a helmet by the owner to paint the iconic ram horn. So
really?
First professional football. Yeah, first team to have a logo on their helmet in the pros. But other things, like they were the first to kind of really have a labor contract with as a group and a team before the league. There was a league-wide one. I mentioned integration before, the first team to integrate in the modern era before a year before Jackie Robinson, with two great UCLA players, Kenny Washington and Woody Strode. Unfortunately, didn't have as long careers, but it was just as groundbreaking, even though football wasn't as big at the time as Major League Baseball, which was America's pastime.
Wow, I can imagine this being made into a movie. I don't know if you wanted it or not, but it just lends itself to that whole thing. We were talking this morning about the important role that coaches play in our lives, whether you're an athlete or not. And I'm talking about the high school level. That person who calls himself a coach, if he's or she's a good one, will also affect the non-athletes in the school, because they always kind of encourage sportsmanship. They encourage, just doing as best as you can, and giving one for the team, and all that stuff that applies to everything that's not sports as well as sports. I think your book does that same thing. I think the book shows us all the human side of football, specifically of the Rams.
Yeah, I tried to show that. I mean, coaches were obviously integral to my dad's career. He thought about being a coach. He went on to I'm the youngest of 7 children, so he decided to have a business career rather than a professional coaching career. But his first job offer was a offensive lineman coaching job with the then Los Angeles Chargers. Now they're back in LA, but they were in San Diego for a long time.
Tell us.
So he had thought about it, but he just at that time coaches didn't make that much money. So he was, he's like, I have a lot of kids, I need to take care of them. But But he viewed his coaches as Sid Gilman, others as kind of partners, as mentors, and I think we all have had those types of folks in our lives, whether they are coaches or teachers or whomever.
Did you have an aha moment as a child that oh my God, my dad's a star? Did you have that moment?
I didn't really have the aha moment. He was a guy who kind of always told us that there's no difference between an NFL star and and anyone else. So to treat everyone equally. As a matter of fact, we were not allowed to ask people for autographs. We were, because we were privileged to be in the locker room or on the field a lot. And, his friends, contemporaries, became coaches. And he said, look, it's an honor, but it's not, you're no different than anyone else. So don't make it a big deal. So that was just something we were always taught.
So tell me a coaching moment where he was your coach. Was he holding onto the back of the seat when you learned how to ride a bicycle? Yeah. Well, tell me.
He taught me how to ride a bike. He actually was very quiet when it came to coaching. So he would, not he wasn't a screamer or a yeller. He would just give advice. So it's kind of how I kind of grew up, being a good listener and not, I don't react well to the yellers. So for me, it was perfect. Some that works for some other people, like my 12-year-old, but not for me. So my dad was kind of the quiet, just kind of critique, respectful critique rather than the yelling, screamer.
You have very eloquent communication skills. I mean, did you always want to go into the political arena? You were a spokesman for a U.S. senator, and you worked as chief of staff to the U.S. Secretary of Commerce. Those are pretty heavy responsibilities.
Yeah, thank you. I kind of fell into it, actually. I wanted to go into professional sports, but more on the management side. And as Larry mentioned at the outset, I was an intern for the Rams, and one summer I was sitting there and one of their longtime columnists who's now deceased for the LA Times. He said, "Why the heck do you want to do this? You're going to make no money and you're going to be miserable working in a little cube." But I've always loved sports, but I after school I did a volunteer program where I was teaching in Los Angeles and just got the bug for politics and the positive impact it can make on people's lives, even though we hear so much garbage about it today. So I've just kind of been in and around it for the last 20 or so years, and I've also been in private business. So I've been one of those people that
I've noticed a connection between sports people and political commentators anyway, maybe not politicians. But it seems like the sports people I've known have always had a better grip on what the reality was of a political story. You know, if it was just a bunch of BS or not. It was always my sports friends that kind of nailed it, you know, before I ever did. You know, I think your book is going to appeal to everybody, not just to sports fans and not just to Rams fans.
No.
I just think you've hit a nerve that everybody will relate to in one way or another. That's why I can see this easily as a movie. By the way, somebody just walked past the window and gave me a thumbs up. So,
since you had said in the beginning of the interview that your proceeds are going to help disadvantaged youth, are you able to meet some of the youth that your book's proceeds are going to help? And have you been able to personally turn some of their lives around? Because sometimes they have an attitude, and you really have to crack that.
Yeah, it's a great question. I worked for an organization in Los Angeles my first year out of college. I was a Jesuit volunteer. I went to Fordham University in New York City, and they have this wonderful program called the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. And the service organization that I worked for was called Homeboy Industries, founded by a Jesuit priest in Los Angeles. And their whole shtick is to help kids that are, challenged in a number of ways. With education, with skills training, with job training, getting them jobs. They have a bakery and a cafe and a silk screening shop, and it's very well known in Southern California. You can buy their bakery products at the airport, etc. So, yes, I've actually worked with some of the kids. It's an organization that's very near and dear to my wife and I's heart. So we wanted to, and my dad I think would be proud that his story was helping others. So and I've been blessed in my life, with good jobs, and so the book is just gravy. So it's fun to talk about the book, but also at the end of the day, it goes to a really special cause.
The book is on Amazon. I'm going to ask about other websites in just a second, but just so you know, it's got a 5-star rating. It's getting great reviews from the readership. I think it's a brand new book. Is this your only book? And did the writing bug bite you, Jim? Are you now?
It's my only book. Writing a book is really hard. It's much harder than I thought, Larry. It takes a long time. I love to write, but I love to write in shorter increments. So I'm not sure if I'll write another book, to be honest with you. But it was a fun process. Obviously, it was very personal. And as you mentioned, you can get it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble or any other, where major books are sold. And we also have a website, hollywoodsteam.com, and you can follow us at Twitter as well, at Hollywood's Team.
Okay, excellent. I have a copy of the book. If you get it, you're going to love having it. Not only is it a great book, it just looks great, and it's got these 2 ribbon bookmarks in it.
That's very.
I think I've never seen.
I'm now going to call them the Bible ribbon.
Yeah, it's got Bible ribbons in it. Yes. So call me if you want the book. The rest of us will have to go buy it. I'll probably get it as a Kindle, which is what I've been doing lately. So thank you for being on the air with us, Jim. What a touching story. Yeah. I just love hearing great stories about families that loved each other.
Thank you so much, gang. It was a pleasure, and it was great to talk to you.
All right, we will take a little break. We'll be right back. This is The Source, WOCA.
The weather is brought to you by myfwc.com. Safe boating is no accident. On this Monday, mostly cloudy with showers and a thunderstorm, high 84 to 88. Monday night will be mostly cloudy with a shower around later on, low 72 to 76. Clouds and some intervals of sunshine on Tuesday with a couple of showers and a thunderstorm, high 86 to the coast, 92 inland. For Wednesday, partly sunny with a shower or 2 and a thunderstorm, high 89 to 93. From the Florida Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Joe Lundberg.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM.
This is a Fox News Alert. I'm Chris Foster. Flooding in Texas is going to get worse before it gets better, with a lot of people still trapped and thousands expected to be forced into shelters.
We need the whole community, not only the federal government forces, but this is a whole community effort from all levels of government, and it's going to require the citizens getting involved.
FEMA Administrator Brock Long, a lot of people are involved.
You've got the professional first responders, but you also have a whole lot of volunteers. They hitched up their boats to their trucks, and they came out and started launching right off the side of the freeway and doing what they could to get people to safety.
Fox's Casey Stiegel in Dickinson, Texas. President Trump's bringing back a program giving local law enforcement departments access to surplus military equipment. Fox confirms that he'll sign an executive order reversing restrictions put in place under President Obama. Fox News. We report, you decide.